Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Step Up to the Mic. This is the place for aspiring and established speakers to take the stage, deliver their talks, and bring them directly to you. Today's featured speaker, he is a business owner, he's an author, he's a public speaker, and he's the author of Restored by the Storm, Navigating Through Life's Unexpected Challenges. Folks, please welcome to the stage Bill Derrick.
Let me start with a question. What would happen if your normal, happy, and successful life was suddenly and unexpectedly interrupted by adversity? I'm talking about that gut-wrenching, drive you to your knees type of adversity I commonly refer to as a storm in your life. How would you feel? How would you react? One thing is for sure, it'll be a defining moment in your life. I believe we all get a chance to go through those times in our lives. And to use an analogy like a hurricane, for some of us, it's a glancing blow by a category 1 hurricane. A little damage, a little wind, some changes, but you move on. But for some of us, we get hit with the eye wall of a category 5 hurricane. Lots of destruction, if not total destruction. Surviving these storms is important, but what's more important is what we learn when we go through these storms and after we get out of the storm. That's the story. And the question is for us, will it be for the better? It's hard to prepare for these storms. Why would we? We live our lives looking ahead. And as leaders, business people, we're expecting growth. We're expecting things to be better tomorrow than they are today. And on top of that, bad things happen to others until they happen to us. So today I'm going to reflect on two storms in my life. I have talked about those two storms in my book, Restored by the Storm, Navigating Through Life's Unexpected Challenges. And I'm going to talk about some details. I'm going to be open and honest with you. I'm going to be very personal with you. By doing that, I believe that I can get you to understand what it's like when we go through those times. I want to inspire and help those who are currently going through those storms, or maybe one just around the corner for any of us. I've had to change my life accordingly because of the storms in my life, and I have to focus on my new normal. My new normal isn't necessarily bad. In fact, in my case, I believe my new normal is better than the old normal. But hopefully, my journey can inspire you to never surrender, no matter what comes your way. I had life under control. I met my wife of 45 years when I was at the University of Minnesota. We both got our MBA degrees. We were both wired for success, and off we went, living our successful lives. I was in construction and was working for a couple of different firms in the Twin Cities area, doing very well. And one day, my father, who owned his own construction business in Western Wisconsin, called me and said he's thinking about retiring. And if I wanted to be part of the company, be an owner of the company, now was the time to come. So, after some deliberation, we packed up our family and moved from the western side of the Twin Cities over towards western Wisconsin so that I could be part of the family business. Family businesses are different, and I think I kind of realized that going into it. But I also realized quickly that some of the autonomy that I had in my world was gone because now I'm working with two other brothers and another partner, and I wasn't in control quite as much as I used to be. But I had to learn that that was part of being part of my family's business. We had a lot of success. The first 10 years we took over the business, we grew it. And it became very successful. And in spite of times where I would question, is this really what I want to do? Success was there. Now would be a good time for me to talk about the curse of success. When we're very successful, we get off track a little bit. We get out of adjustment, so to speak. For myself, I can look back and see the self-sufficiency in my life. I was kind of full of myself, thinking that I could do no wrong, kind of the golden touch, so to speak. Let's talk about priorities. During those times of success, we sometimes can get our priorities mixed up. Now, I know I could probably get everyone to agree on priorities being faith, family, business. But during those times of success, I think, at least in my case, my priorities were more like business, business, and everything else. In fact, it was during this time where my wife grabbed me at home. And at this point, we have four kids. And she says, Bill, I need you to spend more time with me and with our kids. I tried to argue by saying, you don't understand. I need to work long hours. I need to work 6 days a week. I'm doing this to provide the things that we all want. She looked at me and said, there must be a misunderstanding. You see, I didn't marry you for your money. Wow. There's a lesson right there in priorities. I had this unhealthy pride, that pride of being in control, that I could fix any problem. I had to learn the lesson that good leaders have to accept and even seek feedback, even if it isn't much fun at the time. I also had to learn to use a military aviation term. I had to learn that good leaders don't fly solo. And sometimes I believe I was. Around 2006, I was in church one Sunday listening to a sermon by a guest minister who was there, who since has become a very close friend of mine. But he was talking about the three stages of life that people find themselves in. First stage is stage before the storm. And there's the stage while you're in the storm. And finally, that stage when you're out of the storm and how it has changed you. He used a verse from the Bible that talks about a wise man who builds his house on a solid foundation. Yeah, I can relate to solid foundations being in the construction business. But you know what? I listened and was very thankful that the sermon didn't apply to me because I was in control. And these things wouldn't happen to me until they did. 2007, things were slowing down. The experts said that there'd probably be a 10% turn down for 6 months, and then things would come back. While in our business, which was residential construction, commercial industrial construction, and also real estate and land development, it was 5 years. 5 years of being in this storm. By 2008, we were bleeding money. We no longer could make enough money with our construction operations to pay the bankers what we owed them. And they started questioning whether we would pay them back. We were trying to work out deals with them. And they used to be our partners at this time, but they were no longer our partners. They were our lenders, and they wanted their money. A wise old king from the Middle East, whose name is Solomon, wrote in a proverb, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. I was feeling that. Man, we were in survival mode. They were pulling out our personal guarantees that we had signed, threatening us what might happen if we don't pay them. And we were having to lean back on our core values, which assured them that we would pay them back, even though we didn't know how. But I could no longer depend on the size of our bank account because actually it really didn't exist anymore. And I had to start depending on others in order to survive. I had a phone call one day with a gentleman, another businessman from our town, good friend of mine. And I was talking to him about our situation. And I was a little depressed. And I said, Mike, the hardest thing about this is not knowing when it's going to end or how it's going to end. He said, well, Bill, you can determine the ending if you'd like. And I thought, well, how can I do that? And he said, just quit. Give your land back to the banks. Let them foreclose, whatever. Just give up. That'll end it. And I said, I don't like the ending, and quitting is not an option. And he looked at me and just said, well, there you go. Don't quit. And that's been a mantra for me since then. Quitting's not an option. Keep going. Grit. You know, I wanted out of this storm really bad at this point. And I was praying to God. I was saying, God, I was pretty arrogant, pretty prideful to think I wouldn't have to go through something like this. Well, I've learned my lesson. I really have. So take it away. End this for us. Well, I realized his timing was maybe a little different than mine. I had some things to learn yet, but I started reflecting on the things I needed to reflect on. I started looking for the purpose in this storm. I did some reading about this land between where we were and where we're going. And the problem with these storms is you're not sure where you're going sometimes, and you don't know where it ends. Sometimes you just have to trust. But I also noticed during this time how God was working in my life. It wasn't just me. I was no longer in control. Bottom line is, I found out that we can learn just as much from adversity as we can from success. Well, our business started improving in 2012, and we were having to switch from a survival mode to a thriving mode. And I was looking forward to a more normal life. But I also realized in looking around the landscape, our former competitors and other developers who hadn't survived, we survived. And quite frankly, I don't know if we were any smarter or any better. We just used our grit and we just kept one foot in front of the other and we survived by the grace of God. So it's the fall of 2012. I'm certainly looking forward to better things ahead. I'm looking forward to that new normal. And I start feeling these aches and pains in my chest area, wrapping around my back. I'm thinking, wow, that stress really has done a number on me. Started taking some tests, medical tests, and nothing was conclusive. One thing led to another, and the fall of 2013, and All of a sudden, I have another medical problem. I went in, had it looked at. They took some blood tests, and I got a call the next day from the doctor and said, you need to go see a hematologist. The protein levels in your blood are really high. And of course, my mind went to the worst point it could go. And right away I said, are you trying to tell me I have some sort of cancer? And he said, no, I'm not. I'm not qualified to tell you that. You need to see a hematologist. Well, I went and saw a hematologist, did a bunch of tests. Some of them were painful, um, but there was a lot of tests. And on the week of Thanksgiving in 2013, in fact, it was Thanksgiving Day when my hematologist called me, as I told him I wanted to know. He confirmed that I had multiple myeloma, which is a non-curable blood cancer of the plasma cells in our bone marrow. The next day we met with him and we went over it again. And he looked at us and said, your reaction isn't quite the normal reaction. You don't seem to be overly concerned. And I said, well, I'm concerned. But I also am starting to realize that I've been prepared for this. That previous storm prepared me, prepared my mind, my spirit, my being to be ready to fight this. And fight we will. I was told multiple myeloma at the time had a 7-year survival rate from diagnosis. And I just said, well, that's the top of the bell curve. I understand that. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get on the other side of that bell curve to where that tail is nice and long and live a long life. I was determined that cancer was not going to define who I was. I had no way to prepare for this, but yet I was prepared for it by the previous storm. And I also had this attitude that cancer could someday kill me, but it wasn't going to control the way I live. Well, I suffered through a lot of pain during that winter. That pain got worse. And finally, we ended up getting an appointment at Mayo Clinic in the summer of 2014. And at Mayo Clinic, they immediately did a bunch of tests. PET scan was one of them. And I met with my hematologist the next day, and he pointed out the source of my pain. It was a tumor in my T4 disc, which is right between my shoulder blades. And it was eating away at my disc, and it was up against my spinal cord, a very dangerous situation. And my back, my spine was actually compression fracture at that point. And I was actually 2 inches shorter than I used to be because of it. My hematologist was very concerned, and he ordered radiation, 5 days of radiation. Bucket list item for most of us, I concluded. Radiation. Wow. I'm sitting on that table, laying down on that table. I'm prepped for the radiation, this machine around me, under me, over me. And at this point, I look over at the wall, and there's a TV there with a moving scene of water and grass and trees. Well, I look through that. I look beyond that. In some ways, I was looking at the sky. And I just stared out there and I said, Lord, you are driving. I'm moving over. You get in the driver's seat. I'm along for the ride. Take me to where you want me to go. I need to trust you. That was a defining moment. Well, the chemo or the radiation took care of my situation for the time being. But within a year and a half, my numbers were askew again. And now it was time for chemotherapy, something none of us look forward to. I started my first chemo session just before Christmas, Christmas Eve in 2015. I did 2 days a week, 3 weeks on, a week off, started all over again. The chemo did its job on the cancer, brought my numbers down, but it was also doing a job on me. It was toxic to my body. And eventually, in May of 2016, my hematologist took me off the chemotherapy and said it was too dangerous for me at that point. And we started monitoring things. And within a month, he suggested, strongly urged me, I should say, that we consider a stem cell transplant using my stem cells. Basically, a stem cell transplant is they give you a dose of chemo that kills every cell in your blood system, good, bad, or otherwise, completely kills your blood. And 2 days after that, they put your stem cells back in that they harvested from your blood, from my blood system. And you wait 10, 12 days for those stem cells to grow into red cells, white cells, all that. Well, in the meantime, your body goes downhill very quickly. Your immune system is basically non-existent after a week. And you're one of those people walking around with a mask on and a baseball cap because you've lost all your hair. And you're just trying to really survive. It's like having the flu for 6 weeks. Well, the stem cell transplant was over. I spent 4 months between the time I went to Mayo Clinic for the transplant to the time I was ready to go back to work, recuperating. But it was during this time when I was recuperating, I had a lot of time to think. I'd lay in my favorite recliner, which I still have to this day, with my laptop, and I started pounding out my story. My journey through cancer is what it started, and then it was the storms and how I got through them. It gave me lots of time to reflect on my life. In fact, I was also invited during this time to give a speech at a national organization to tell my story. And I realized not only did God give me the voice that I have, but he also gave me the story to tell with my voice. You know, in my brokenness, I was healed. And it helped me to put my trust in not only my Lord, but also others. I was so dependent on so many people, but especially my wife, who was my caregiver during this time and took care of me. I couldn't imagine going through it without a caregiver like her. My why in life has changed. Where I used to want to be able to count my money at the end of every year, those things aren't important anymore. Oh, heck, yes, I still have to keep track of those things. I'm a businessman. But I've realized the success is still important. But more important, it's what you do with that success that matters. I want to tell you a story. In 2018, we got a chance to go to the Western Wall. Now, I was feeling pretty good at the time. My numbers, blood numbers, were in an acceptable range yet. And we go to Israel, we go to Jerusalem, we go to the Western Wall. I put my prayers on a little piece of paper, fold it up, put it in the wall, in the cracks in the wall of the old Western Wall. And I put my hand on the wall It was about a 70-degree day, sunny, late February in Jerusalem. And I prayed to God for healing, and I prayed to him for direction on where to go with my life. We get back from the trip to Jerusalem, and I was still going to Mayo once a month for a checkup. And a month and a half later at my checkup, my doctor says, "What's changed?" And I go, "What do you mean, what's changed?" He said, "Your numbers have dropped to where the abnormality is present, but it's not measurable. In other words, you're in remission." And I'm going, wow, I was told that remission was a term that wouldn't be used with my disease. Well, there's been some advances, but at the same time, he said, don't get your hopes up too high because usually this can happen on a rare occasion, but after a few months, it comes back. That was in 2018. As I sit here in 2025, I am still in remission. They said it had an average 7-year survival rate. That was in 2013. 12 years later, I'm here, surviving, thriving, in remission. I am a walking, talking miracle as far as I'm concerned. Even though I have cancer, I have been blessed by it. It has been a gift. Oh, don't get me wrong. I'm not glad I have cancer, but I can see the gift. I can see the blessings in it. There's another proverb that I've learned to live by, and that's many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. For a guy that was a control freak, the way I interpret that phrase is you want to make God laugh? Tell him what your plans are. I want to give you a couple of takeaways before I end. Number one is gratitude. Don't take anything for granted. Don't wait until the threat of losing something before you appreciate it. Be content with what you have. Have the attitude of gratitude, as Zig Ziglar used to say, and stop comparing your life to others. Be grateful for what you have. Number two is we learn as much from adversity as we do from success, perhaps more. Number three, what do we really have control over? I believe the two things that we really have control over is our attitude and our effort. So make them good. You do need to have both. Number four, as I've said, quitting is not an option. Success may be just on the other side. You need to get around that hurdle, under it, through it, whatever it takes. Don't quit. Don't quit. Don't quit. Resilience and grit. And number five, live each day on purpose. We only have one life to make a difference, so make it a good one. Don't waste it. It's kind of like sand going through your fingers in your hand. You only have so much there. Do something with your life. Don't look back with regret. What are you waiting for? More time? More money? What? Just do it. And last of all, I want to leave you with this thought. If you're going through a storm, if you've been through a storm, you always have to have the right attitude. And sometimes, people will, well-meaning, will say, remember the good old days? Well, to be quite honest with you, no one ever tells us when we're in the good old days that this is the good old days. My point is this. What makes you think that the good old days aren't still ahead? So I'm going to say, have the attitude, no matter where you're at, no matter what your age, no matter what your physical situation is, No matter what your financial situation is, always have the attitude that the best is yet to come. Thank you.
Bill Derrick, everybody. Bill, that was absolutely amazing. Really and truly quite a story, brother. I appreciate you coming on here and telling that to our listeners. Not the first time you've told that story, I can tell.
No, it's not.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I'm curious with what you've had to go through. The first time that you got that call to say, "Hey, we'd love you to come speak and tell your story." What was that like for you? Was it, exciting? Like, "Hey, I'd love to," or was it like, "Whoa, how am I going to do this?"
Well, in all honesty, I had spoken to a group previous, but it was a much smaller group, and it was more when they called me. It was I was on the board of directors of this organization, but I was kind of out of it because of my diagnosis and what I was going through. And the executive director said, "Bill, can you come to the meeting?" It was in Arlington, Texas, and just tell people what you're going through. And I said, "Well, I just need 5 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. Just let people know." And she said, "No, I'm going to schedule you to be the last speaker of the day." And and I go, "Well, wait a minute here. I don't even know if I can go yet because it was, a little over 2 months after my transplant." And she encouraged me. She was like, "Bill, you've got a story to tell. Please tell it." So I, I, yeah, it was that first time you kind of like, really, I'm going to do this. But the point is it was my story. It wasn't something I had to research and come up with a bunch of, intellectual type things. I just told my story. And I was rewarded for that from the standpoint as I'm telling my story. And I don't have a stitch of hair. I mean, I'm bald. And half the room knows me, maybe. There's 100 people. Half the people probably knew me. Half didn't know who I was. And I'm out there telling a story. And every time I looked at somebody, their eyeballs were looking at me. And nobody was looking on their phone. You know how people are these days? They
Oh
they
yeah.
pretend they're paying attention, but they got the phone down here, or whatever. No, everybody was looking at me.
Wow.
And I realized that as I'm telling my story, that I had something special, both my voice and presentation, but also that story. So I, I know I didn't quite answer your question, but yeah, that's kind of how it happened.
You answered it just fine. I think I got it loud and clear, man. Um, I mean, I can tell how emotional it is, to tell that story just from watching you. And honestly, I was one of those, and my eyes were glued to the screen while you were doing that just now. I don't think I missed a beat. Um, and when you go around and you tell that story, and when you wrote the book, is the purpose for telling the story to folks and the purpose for writing the book, are those the same, or are you experiencing different things, different goals in writing the book as opposed to going around and sharing the story as a speaker?
I think in my mind, the people that are reading my book, they have more time to reflect on the words
Okay.
that they're reading. And so it's probably written in a way, at least my purpose was that I would give them, whether it's paragraph by paragraph, chapter by chapter, or maybe even word by word, it gives them time to pause and reflect. Whereas when you're speaking, I'm, I'm not, I've done a few, but, I learn something every time, as probably most speakers do. But there, I'm trying more to motivate them. Pay
Hmm.
attention to what I have to say. I'm trying to motivate you. I'm trying to inspire. And to be perfectly honest, I know I mean, I'm just sure of it that somebody in that room that I'm speaking to needs to hear my story. I don't know whether it's only one person or whether there's a bunch of them, but so I'm telling it probably with the idea of with a little more urgency as I'm speaking.
Yeah, good deal. Good deal. The
At the end of the day, we're just trying, I'm just going, the purpose is to help others, to make a difference in the lives of others. And, Rory, that was the whole purpose.
yeah, it sounds like you're trying to maybe get to them before their storm hits, so they can make the changes that your wife had to tell you had to make.
Yeah.
Am I close?
Yeah. 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 Jeannie is, as I would hope most men would say of their wives, but Jeannie is beautiful inside and out. And she just, she gave up a life. She gave up her business career to raise our kids once our third and four came along. And, she's quite an individual. She's type A like I am, and which people saying you've been married 45 years, and I go, yeah, we somehow make it work. But
Congratulations on that.
thank you. And I just I just feel it's really important. And I had to learn this. I had to learn to just give up that control of I'm in control by myself. I don't need you. No. Um, I think it started when she let me know that, hey, spend more time with us. And I kind of think about those things now. I mean, whether it's our own children, growing up, adult children, having kids of their own, or all that. Even as a businessman here, I'm still one. I'm still the leader here, and if I see a employee that's maybe spending a little too much time at the office, knowing I like that as an employer, but I also need to be a little more. Hey, what are you still doing here?
Yeah.
Of course, I got one employee I say that to a lot, and he says, "What are you still doing here?" And so,
Right.
but anyway, that getting your priorities right was really important to me, Robbie.
Yeah. It sounds like it. And it sounds like that's a big part of the message.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah. There's I'm sure you know this, but I'm not sure everybody gets this until they hear your talk. But I'm guessing the book is the same way, that there's a whole lot more to this story than people
yeah,
really get at first glance.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. It is, and I think the thing that I'm aware of now after the book is out, and even a little bit of speaking before the book came out, but is people go, "Wow, I can't believe how open you are about what you went through," and I guess it's my nature. I mean, sometimes I probably, maybe TMI sometimes, I don't know, but yeah, but I believe that if by being that open with people, that that makes for a better relationship. And and that's really what I'm trying to do is build relationships with the people that are reading my book or that I'm having the opportunity to speak with and that type of thing.
Yeah. I mean, you've got a lot of serious positives as a speaker that most folks who haven't done a lot of speaking don't have yet. And being open, obviously, encourages the crowd then to open themselves up to be able to receive that. And the other thing you have is, I mean, you got a great voice, but you have a fantastic pace with the way you tell the story. I just want to
Thank
make
you.
sure I told you that because
Thank you.
I'm not sure it's something you worked on or not. Maybe it's natural, it could be, but it's really, it makes the speech for you. It makes the
It could
talk.
be that I'm 71 years old and not as fast as I used to be.
I'm just forgetting what I'm saying, so that's why I'm going
Yeah,
slow.
wait a minute, what was I going to say?
I love that. It's good. All right, humble till the end. I got you. I understand.
Yeah.
Perfect, perfect.
Well, Rory, I've always been one of those people that, they say you got to practice your trade, study your trade, practice it, and
Oh
all
yeah.
that. I'm one of those people that would listen to a speaker, no
Mhm.
matter whether it was a keynote speech with hundreds of people or a room of 25 or whatever, somebody get up and speak. And I'd always be the one to be sitting there going, I could do that. I could do
I,
that. And maybe perhaps subconsciously, when I listen to the speakers, I listen in a way that says, I want to learn from how they're speaking and
nice.
what makes them good and what they're doing and helpful. And I appreciate what you said about my voice too. And somebody the other day reminded me, they said, oh, podcasters should love to have you on their program. You got such a great voice, and all that. And I never
Absolutely.
thought of and but there is that.
No,
So
it's you come across beautifully. And well, now that I know that you've been secretly, preparing to be a speaker for years, I mean, well, that's a different story. But
yeah.
I'm still very impressed, man.
Oh, thank
All
you.
right. Yeah, I love this. Let's get the contact info out, though, for sure. How can people contact you, find the book, so on and so forth? And we'll make sure it's all in the show notes, of course.
Well, the book, Restored by the Storm, Navigating Through Life's Unexpected Challenges, by Bill Derrick. It's available wherever books are sold, and I mean that sincerely.
Nice.
You can go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever you buy your books. Or if you want, you can go to my website, which is billderrick.com, and there'll be a little button on there that'll say buy the book here, and it'll send you to another website that is an online bookseller that you can buy it from there. So.
Wonderful. Okay. I'll make sure that that stuff is in the show notes for everybody. You have a lot of folks who are pretty wowed right now. They listen to this episode. They may not have known what they were showing up for, but they sure know what they got. Any parting words to the folks who are listening about anything that is close to your heart?
Well, and I'm asked this a lot, Rory. If it's a radio show, somebody will say, "Well, if you're driving in the car right now, what do you want them to hear?" That kind of
Hmm.
thing. I I think that if you're going through a storm right now, I think you got to understand the storm will end. It because when you're in the storm, you really don't think about it ending. You're just in it, but it will end. You also have to understand that unfortunately, it may not end the way you want it to end, but it will end. And I think you just have to understand it's going to change your life and be open to the changes that it's going to bring to your life. But get through it one step at a time. Don't quit. Don't quit.
Wonderful parting words, brother. I appreciate that very much, folks. Like you said, author of "Restored by the Storm: Navigating Through Life's Unexpected Challenges," Bill Derrick. Bill, thank you so much for coming on, doing a magnificent talk, and for sharing your story with everybody. I'm sure it made a difference with at least one person out there, and I know that's what you're trying to do. So bless you, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Rory. It's been a pleasure meeting you. I hope we have a chance to talk again sometime.
Me too. Me too.
All right.
Folks, that's been another spectacular episode of Step Up to the Mic. If you're an aspiring or current speaker and you want to bring your talk to the masses, message us today. Do not ever stop talking and let us help you to step up to the mic.